Hello and welcome to a special live recording of a panel discussion with three guests who have recently returned from COP28. The theme of this discussion is insights for Australia around food systems and agriculture from COP28. And importantly, we'll be talking about the Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action. First of all, I just want to welcome all my guests. Thank you for taking the time to join me this afternoon. Thank you. All right, let's kick off proceedings. You're all back from COP. I would like to talk to you very quickly, 20 seconds around your feelings and thoughts now that you're back. Frustration, exhilaration, hopefulness. Michelle, let me come to you first of all for just an initial feedback.
Thanks, Matt. My initial feedback, well, I think what's most exciting about COP28 is that food and agriculture are well and truly on the climate agenda. And I'd say the second most exciting part of that is that really so much of the conversation outside of the negotiations and kind of in all the pavilions, all the conversations that we had with partners and stakeholders from around the world really positions farmers as absolutely central to that action.
Thank you, Michelle. Sue, same question to you.
Thanks, Matt. I think actually my 20 seconds on that would be that I'm probably suffering from delayed shock. It's only really now that I've got back at home in Australia, back into the program, that I've realised just how big it was to be at COP and how big it was to have the conversations that we had. And so I'm probably now just reflecting on just what a marvellous opportunity it was to have the foundation sponsor us to be at COP and how important that probably was to the future of agriculture and food systems.
Brilliant, Sue. Thank you. Michael.
Wow, what a roller coaster week it was. Yeah, look, lots of highs, lots of lows for me. I can't believe it's taken this long for people at COP to recognise that food systems might be in danger. Look, I went there with my Nuffield hat on, looking for evidence around understanding of agroforestry and how that fits into agriculture. It was very interesting meeting farmers from all around the world, realising that no matter how big or small we are, a lot of us are facing the same challenges, not only to change, but for recognition of where we fit in.
Brilliant, Michael. Thank you. We're going to play a short video. Michelle, could you introduce this video, please?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So this was a great opportunity that we had to engage one of our partners, digital storytellers, to come along with us and sort of follow the journey of what, getting food systems and agriculture on the agenda actually meant. And so this video is a bit of an overview of how that happened and what it means potentially. But really, what we wanted to do was focus on the people on the ground, really, the farmers who make the change, and hear from them about what it meant for them.
I'm just enjoying this moment because I did promise many of you over the last few years that we would bring agriculture and food system to center stage at COP28, and here we are. I am pleased to announce, drum rolling, that the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action has so far received 134 endorsements.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's what it feels like for everybody to be inside the Emirates Declaration. We are in, and it's governments that are in, it's everybody else that's in. And right at the center of this work are farmers.
We are watching disaster. We are seeing that they go the opposite way of nature. So now we need to change to have healthy food, healthy people working with and for nature.
There is hope fast because before there was no voice for change, there was no voice for farmers. But we had an opportunity to present the voices of farmers. So to me, that is a plus. And a challenge is to embrace agroecology for climate action.
Australian farmers are progressive, they're innovative, they're data-driven. So I think if farmers are going to make changes, Australian farmers are in the box seat. But There has to be value in what we're producing, there has to be value in what we're conserving, but there's a lot of opportunities for agriculture.
Food is part of culture, it's part of who we are. So how we look at agriculture, our food systems, feeding the world and restoring landscape health is really critical to how we move forward, increasing agricultural productivity while really ensuring that we have nature positive, carbon neutral agriculture.
30% of the problem in terms of causing climate change, but also 30% of the solution is our food and land use systems. If we turn that around into a more regenerative system, the cost that we are currently incurring of our broken food system is about $12 trillion. The benefit we can get by moving to a regenerative system, by all means possible, is about $4 trillion. This is probably the biggest economic opportunity that we have in this century, and frankly, absolutely needed to achieve our climate goals.
The so what of the Emirate Declaration, there's a lot of dimensions to it. It should mean that as countries are preparing their national determined contributions, that they will put a stronger focus on food systems. But at the same time, if the issues in the declaration are important enough to be signed today, they're definitely important enough to become a part of the policy practices as soon as possible.
I am extremely pleased that this COP did not only create momentum for food systems, but successfully mobilize action from non-state actors all around the world.
The world is not in a good place right now, but I think we have such a powerful thing in our hands today. Let's take food systems transformation to the next level. Thank you.
Michelle, how does watching that video back make you feel?
You know, I'm so glad you asked that. I realised how bizarre actually it is to be here now after I have lived that experience so intensely for 10 days. Like, we were literally living and breathing all of those conversations, all of those ideas every day. And it was so inspiring and exciting.
Fantastic. Michelle, do you want to pick up? The floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. So, you know, I might just start by explaining, I guess, why Macdoch Foundation was there and why sort of we see COP as a pretty important forum for the work that we do. So most listeners to this session will know that we're obviously funders of agriculture and climate work in Australia, but we also fund overseas, and we fund in the US specifically, and we use that as a sort of platform, I guess, to connect our work and the issues to Australia and vice versa. So we see there's huge opportunities for sort of two-way learning and exchange. And I think our trip to COP with Sue and Michael and Alistair, our chairman, was really kind of living that. And really, it's also about kind of, after a period of feeling quite disconnected from the rest of the world, you know, our work is really let's bring these issues, you know, bring what Australians are doing into that international conversation, and similarly remind Australia that we're part of these, you know, these bigger conversations, that these are issues that affect all of us. So we were there working with some of our international funding partners like the Rockefeller Foundation and IKEA Foundation, talking about some of the work we do together. We co-hosted the Food Systems Pavilion with the IKEA Foundation. We curated a day of sessions on agriculture and climate change. Sue was part of those discussions, as was Michael, as was I, moderating a couple of sessions on natural capital and the TNFD. So it was really about immersing ourselves really deeply in those conversations. But I suppose what's really significant for us as Australians, thinking about this moment in time, thinking about the work that we're doing, the urgency around the work that we do, you know, food and agriculture has been missing from these very big climate conversations in a serious way in Australia, despite the fact that we know that it contributes very heavily to our emissions profile, and farmers and landscapes are really vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And that impacts all of us, not just from literally the production side, but actually all across our food system. You know, we are vulnerable to the effects of climate change through supply chains, through, you know, human resilience, so many health impacts. So it was the first time that food and agriculture really had centre stage, you know, and there were real breakthroughs in terms of identifying that kind of nature, climate, food security, health nexus. You know, so we were talking about health issues, mental health, we were talking about nutrition, we were talking about food security and supply chains, drawing down emissions, methane, all of these things finally kind of had the space to be connected. And I think that's often one of the things that we don't do enough, recognize the intersection of all of those issues. The other really significant thing which kind of brought that to reality was the fact that now, you know, 159 countries, including Australia, have signed the Leaders' Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture and Resilient Food Systems. That impacts, you know, the 159 countries together encompass 530 million farmers. That's really powerful, and we've signed up to this. So I think the questions we need to be asking, what does this mean? You know, what does this mean for Australia and our kind of appetite for acceleration on food systems and agriculture contributing to the climate change solution? The final point that I'll make is that the FAO released its roadmap for sustainable food systems, which is providing pathways for countries and actors to determine how do we limit food systems and agricultural emissions in a way that helps us maintain temperatures to 1.5 degrees. What's really significant about that is that included in that roadmap is the signalling that livestock in grasslands play a mitigation role. That is really material because for so long we've heard that livestock are part of the problem. We need to eliminate it. But the FAO has formally recognised that livestock in grasslands play a hugely powerful role in our mitigation strategy. There is one final point that I will make. Macdoch Foundation, along with a whole bunch of other non-state actors, signed the non-state actor declaration on food systems transformation, which means that we are doubling down our efforts in terms of resourcing, commitment to really accelerate the movement of food systems and agriculture as part of our climate plans. And so we will be doing that now that we're back in Australia.
Michelle, thank you. That was fantastic. I'm going to hand to Sue next. Dr. Sue Ogilvy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'd like to build on a couple of the points that Michelle's made. Firstly, about how important it is to be part of that global conversation. And probably secondly, the role of farmers as a solution. So Farming for the Future is that really important connection about how do we actually put traction into actually making impact in the big problems and the big opportunities that Michelle spoke about. So to be at COP and having conversations about what Farming for the Future is trying to do with all of these other international actors, incredible diversity, countries, different roles in the food system, different organisations, NGOs, governments, etc. What was really apparent to me is that the sort of things that we talk about at Farming for the Future and what we've designed Farming for the Future to do are also on the minds and actually being enacted on in many countries. And to me, that presents a really important sense of encouragement, but it also paints the picture of the potential for cross-international and global collaboration. So the two things that I'd like to really sort of draw out is that we heard from many people and in many sessions, including the side of the United Nations side event that I was invited to be a panelist on, that we know that farmers can potentially and certainly need to enact decarbonisation strategies and to enact nature positive strategies whilst preserving food security. And we know that in Australia, while we can make those investments to decarbonise and become nature positive in agriculture, many farmers actually fear that that's going to come at a negative economic cost. And what I heard was that fear is broadly shared around the globe. And when I spoke to people about the approach that Farming for the Future is taking to actually develop ways to reveal the economic opportunities and the economic trade-offs that might be associated with decarbonisation. I got a very resounding agreement that that was what was needed, and I got a very resounding echo of, oh, we're also working in that area, we're working on this bit, and that presents an opportunity for us to work together to leverage other countries' solutions. The other thing that I heard really, really strongly was putting farmers at the centre. And often when you hear that, it's platitudes. It's saying we'll talk about farmers and we'll talk about what farmers should do. But the difference in conversation at COP was a recognition that putting farmers at the centre does not mean telling farmers what to do. It actually means enabling and empowering them with finance, with technologies, with innovation, but with space to actually be at the table and be actually shaping the future of how we measure and manage and invest in natural capital and those other solutions. And that was really drawn home to me in a couple of really key interactions that I had. One with a woman from Kenya who has got some, really important investments in collaboration platforms for farmers, but also from a panel event that I chaired at the Australian Pavilion that had the president of the National Farmers Federation of Australia and their equivalents from Canada and Brazil. And what I heard there was farmers are ready. Farmers actually have got very real potential to realise enormous opportunities, but they need to be empowered with finance, with research, with technology. And so I was greatly encouraged by that sort of scaling up and scaling down, that echoing of what we think is important coming back to me as, yes, it is important, and that what we're doing is probably a really good approach that many people were admiring. In fact, the Director General for the Sustainable Agriculture Division of Canada specifically sought me out after that United Nations panel to say that she was very interested in finding out what we were doing. But probably I'd like to close with one of the highlights for me was watching Michael Taylor basically, demonstrate all those qualities of Australian farming that I have come to admire very, very greatly. And I really did feel an enormous sense of pride when I saw him strike up a conversation in, I don't know what language it was, Michael, but in the very first queue, which was to last 3 hours, I think. But in the very first queue, there was no doubt that Australian farming was representing us very proudly.
Fantastic, Sue. Thank you. I want to talk more to Michael about that later, and the languages that he converses in. Also described as a rock star at COP, but we'll come to that at the end. Michael, if I could hand to you from the New England Tablelands, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. I've got tears in my eyes. just the emotions coming out. I think seeing that video again puts a lump in my throat, and I'm not sure because of the hope it represents or because of the inaction that's happened, the inaction that hasn't existed for so long. And I look at my family story, which is, 6 generations. There's been a lot happen in the last few generations, but we've seen a lot of changes in that time. To come together, I think I'll probably, just building on what Sue and Michelle have gone over, a little bit of a timeline of what happened. First up, thank you very much to the Macdoch Foundation and the Farming for the Future program for having me along for the ride. And it was a ride. It just coincided, like I said, with a side trip to Rome to FAO to present on scaling up agroforestry, and that was definitely fitted with everything that I was seeing. First day was lots of long queues, lots and lots of people, just a massive crowd of people from all over the world. And I didn't meet anybody there that wasn't there because they were wanting to make a change or trying to understand what needed to be done, or just trying to understand what was happening. And a pretty amazing crowd to be amongst. And even if some maybe are very misguided from where they're coming from, I won't go into that. My first panel session was with a group of farmers from all over the world, from the Philippines, from India, from Brazil, and a representative that presented for a whole group of farmers from all over Europe. And and again, the stories coming from everywhere was so different and yet so similar in many ways. We've all adapted to our local situations. We've adapted to the communities and the cultures that we live under. And if I'd put anyone forward as someone that was able to adapt to whatever was thrown at them, farmers are usually pretty good, because Mother Nature does that every day. There shouldn't be any waiting around. And as I said, doing has been the catalyst for change for us. I think we need to just keep doing. And we mightn't get it all right, but we need to support, measurements like what Farming for the Future are doing. And
yep. Michelle, is there a feeling for you of it's time just to get on with it as well?
Look, I think it's more that it's about time that people started to take notice, to be honest, because I think people have been getting on with it for a long time. And I think, for me, one of the most powerful things is, that feeling of, okay, now we have this moment, and what are we going to do with that? How do we harness this momentum? How do we bring this energy back to Australia, and this appetite to consider this sector finally as a sector that needs to be transitioned, but also a sector that can deliver huge opportunities in terms of sequestration. So I think that's kind of what is most salient to me. I think the other thing I would say was, and Michael alluded to it a little bit, I talked at the beginning of this of kind of sort of key takeaways from some of the big announcement and pledges and what they all mean. And let's bear in mind that some of those, most of those things are non-binding. But, Australia endorsing something like the Leaders' Declaration, that should mean something, and we should make it mean something. And, committing to incorporating, food and agriculture into your nationally determined contributions by 2025, that needs to mean something. So I think it's up to us to make sure that means something. And I think, so what I was saying was, Michael alluded to was, there was a lot of greenwashing going on at COP. This was not a kind of purist view of everyone doing the right thing and saying the right thing. And, it was a kind of concentrated space in which a whole range of really contradictory ideas, really siloed ideas, people with huge conflicts and other agendas, pushing a message that we need to be very vigilant about. And greenwashing, I think, in the agricultural space is really real. In the nature space, it's really real. We've always been very live to that in the foundation's work. But I think, Michael talked about this co-opting of these terms around nature positive and regenerative agriculture. We need to be so alive to those things, because if it's up to the big food companies to be kind of managing those things, I think we're in a lot of trouble, because those things need to be real, and we need to hold people to account. And that's why data and research, we're sort of coming up time and time again in all of our conversations for the outcomes that we need to draw down emissions, to reduce emissions, to support nature, to support people. We need these things to be real, and they need to be supported by evidence. And so I think for us, our role is, how do we make that real? How can we model that and incorporate that in everything that we do? But also just coming back to that accountability piece, signing up to those endorsing those declarations, making these commitments. We have a role to play in making those commitments real.
Thank you, Michelle. Sue, to you. Earlier on, you mentioned empowering farmers. I wondered if you could just talk about that a bit more. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's part of the sort of thing about, as Michelle's just said, make it real. And when we think about empowering farmers, what we think about, and Michael's spoken about it, you know, assuring food security while decarbonising and being nature positive. And when we think about empowering farmers, certainly at Farming for the Future, we're thinking that what we need to do is empower farmers to make the very best choices that are possible in the moment, given their situation. And so to us, having good information and good evidence that, as Michelle has said, is rigorous, is scientifically, you know, coherent, is locally appropriate, is a really important part of that solution. But also for farmers to have an environment around them to actually use that information and to make those choices. As Michael has just demonstrated, he's drenched, you know, and treated 4,000 sheep just, you know, what was it, overnight, Michael? And so these are, you know, people that have to make lots and lots of decisions. So the environment that we create for them to actually make their choices, make their plans, make those investments, decide on those priorities is really, really important. And so at Farming for the Future, what we think about is how do we give farmers the best information set to make the best choices.
Michael, I'd like to finish with you. Just your feedback on what you've just heard there from Michelle and Sue. And then I want to find out how many languages you speak as well, just as a final question. So just take yourself off mute. What's your views on what you've just heard from Michelle and Sue?
Yeah, look, only 2 languages and little bits of a few others.
Good man.
Enough to get me in trouble. Yeah, look, I think definitely Australian farmers, as I said, are in the box seat. There's lots of opportunities for us. You know, even this morning I was musing with my daughter as we're treating a mob of sheep, and we were thinking, wow, this, you know, mob of 400 odd lambs is, you know, potentially feeding, you know, 150, 200 people over the course of a year. That's a big responsibility, and we need to start thinking really hard about how we change, how we can change. And I think, you know, again, I think we're in a really good position to make those changes because of the information that's available, because of the technology, because of the communication that's available. So yeah, a lot of work to be done, but a lot of opportunities. There's hope. There is hope. There's always hope.
Excellent. Sue, Michelle, Michael, thank you very much for taking the time to join this live recording. Really appreciate your time. So thank you to each of you, and thank you to you for watching this. Please visit the Farming for the Future website if you need more information, and we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.